One day in college, I was in the back of an Uber, all sparkly with hair extensions in, like going to a party with my best friend. And this Uber driver crashes through a building and I am screaming. My nervous system just went into fight mode. Like I was fighting to live. And I went home and was just crying and crying in front of my mirror and looking at myself and kind of had this transcendental experience of taking myself through if I had died and how it would have felt to leave life on that note. And so I just decided in that moment that, you know, I had been given the second chance at life and I was going to go all in at just being myself. I feel like just being willing to own myself, even when other people didn't like it or didn't get it, was my initiation into claiming being a mystic.
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of this Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed. Hi, and welcome to This Tantric Life. I am sitting here with Bela Divine. She is a Mexican mystic. And something that inspires me so deeply about her work is she combines the transmissions from her grandmother of Toltec Wisdom with a deep understanding of trauma integration and some of the most modern techniques for healing. So I'm sitting here today so we can experience the path of the modern witch that walks the ancient traditions and also the most powerful understanding and work with how we heal ourselves in this lifetime to be the most fully expressed mystical beings we can possibly be. Welcome, Bela.
Thank you, Layla. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, it's so good to have you. I love that, I just stepped off the plane from Baja and I was like, whoa, I was in this really intense New Year's portal and you were in Yosemite. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're both fresh out of our portals, right out to share this podcast.
Landing into the new year, but it feels like a good start.
Yeah. So as I was diving into you and your work, one of the things that I was really excited to know more about is this transmission of Toltec wisdom from your maternal grandmother. She's Mexican. Yeah? Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. So my abuela was raised in Tula Hidalgo, which is where the Toltecs are from. Her mom and her dad both had Toltec roots. And really it was the maternal lineage, the mother line, that carried the teachings on. I come from this long line of badass, hyper independent women. My great grandmother was a machete wielding woman who killed rattlesnakes with her machete. Yeah, so she was such a badass. And they just were really adamant about passing down these teachings. And I would say that most of these teachings are energetic. And obviously with each generation, I think that there's unique takes on how the wisdom is incorporated because, I was given a book that my grandma hand wrote on notes that she took from her mom and her, her grandmother's teachings. And I know that there are the more popularized Toltec teachings by Don Miguel Ruiz, but the Toltec teachings have a lot to do specifically with the heart and heart coherence and leading from the heart. They see the heart as the compass that kind of leads you to your destiny. The Toltecs believe that there's a million paths for you in this world, but a path without heart is never enjoyable. And so it's really important to pick a path that lights your heart up. I think that's one of my favorite teachings from the lineage.
So you're also big into trauma work and you've really incorporated deep training in trauma with people like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and other trauma experts into this spiritual wisdom. The question that came to me that I would ask myself is I was so far ahead in my spiritual path before I was yo, my heart's fucked up. And I don't say that lately. I was between sexual abuse from my biological father and really complex PTSD from my family in general. When I first started tuning into my human heart, it was barricaded. It was alienated. It was hollow. It felt like inside. It was terrifying to face that. And I actually felt spiritual love and soul love far, far, far before it felt safe to feel human love. So do the Toltecs have teachings, or even what would you say as a teacher, is a guidance for someone who's like, wow, following the path of the heart sounds beautiful. And for so many of us, it's like, how do I even get into my actual heart?
And first of all, thank you for sharing just like that bit of your story. You're such a powerful woman. And so knowing just like a little bit of where you came from is really cool. And to answer your question, I would say that tapping into the wisdom of your heart really relies on imagination. There are three big core, like I call them like the three I's: imagination, intuition, and intention within the Toltec wisdom are really important. And imagination, in my opinion, is the key to healing. And so if you want to tap into your heart, you first have to be able to imagine what love feels like. If you've never experienced it, if your parents didn't give you that love, and you can imagine what spiritual love feels like, or you can tap into, I don't know, what love felt like by watching your favorite Disney movie when you're a little girl. That imagination, I mean, your subconscious can't tell the difference between what's real and imagined, right? So that practice of imagining begins to teach you that is what love feels like.
It's so beautiful that you say that, because so many people tend to think of imagination as cheating, right? Like, oh, I'm imagining it, therefore it's not real. But what they're missing is that visionary quality, right? Which is where imagination comes from, is our ability to create. It's our creative potential. So it's a power of the goddess, right? So when you're imagining your heart's beauty, you're imagining the love that you want to feel. To me, you're communing with the creative power of the goddess to tap into what your heart can really be.
Absolutely. And in the Toltec wisdom, one of the core teachings that is quite popular is that life is our canvas and we're the artist, and we're all creative. We're creating life in every moment with every word that we speak. If I say come closer, we're creating intimacy. If I say leave me alone, I'm setting boundaries or creating distance, right? And so when you recognize your ability to create your life, whether it's verbally in this physical dimension or within your own imagination, by opening yourself up to the possibilities, you become so much more powerful, really.
And there's this beautiful technique, maybe it exists somewhere. I feel like I discovered it in a ceremony recently, because I was actually shown, oh my God, after all the work I've done on my heart and all the time I've spent wanting to open my heart to love, to be more loving, to feel love, to move what felt like a gargantuan stone wall, like off of my heart that was like suffocating me, right? I did all of this. And all of a sudden I realized like it still didn't feel fully good to be loved by a man. And it was so hard for me to imagine a reality in which I could be loved by a man and it would feel good deep inside of my heart. Like trauma goes that deep, right? Even with my dad, it's still that much legacy and this much work. And it's so possible to even heal the most unthinkable things. And so what I did when I was sitting there, cause I was like, I don't know, man, this like, you got me. I don't even know how I would imagine this into reality. And all of a sudden it came to me. I was like, I'm going to borrow my friends' nervous systems. And I actually asked their consent, right? And I was like, hey, Rachel Pringle, right? She's been on the podcast. Alyssa Nobriga, she's been on the podcast. Can I borrow your nervous system for a moment? Because they have the ability to feel really loved by their male partners and blossom from it. And so I actually was like imagining and feeling myself as Rachel, who has this beautiful relationship with her dad, who was raised in so much safety. And in allowing myself to be her, I could tap into this ability of my nervous system. And the thing I loved about that practice was I was like, wow, we look at like celebrities or like Disney movies, and it's almost like, oh, that person has this thing and I don't have it. What if you could borrow whatever it is that you think you see in them through your imagination in order to imagine yourself into your highest potential?
I love that concept, because you know that quote that's like, oh, we are like a combination of the 5 people that we spend the most time around. Well, we're also reflecting the nervous systems that we spend the most time around. If you go to a supermarket even and you are around someone who's like angrily yelling on their phone, it's kind of like we're playing hot potato with our nervous system reactions. And then we can internalize that anger and go project it at someone else. And so knowing that it's possible to regulate our nervous systems just by choosing to be around people who have access to that kind of safety and wholeness and openness to love. I mean, I think resistance to love is so real. And I'm sure that being the tantric teacher that you are, you know that we all, I think all of us humans kind of have a little bit of resistance to love unless we do a lot of work on it. I know I certainly do.
I haven't met someone yet that had zero resistance to love. It's wild that like the thing that we feel like we want the most is also often the hardest thing for us to receive.
And it shows up in different ways, right? I also think that what you're talking about, this like working on healing and opening your heart, being layered and multidimensional is so important because the heart, as far as the chakras go, is the most sensitive, in my opinion, because we all experience grief throughout life, right? So when we experience grief, our hearts contract and close, and then we have to do the work to open them back up again. And so it's this constant opening and closing every time we experience heartbreak or loss or whatever it may be. And so I think it's not a matter of getting our hearts to be like fully open forever, but just knowing how to continue to open them up even more, right? And to be vulnerable.
Yeah, it's like creating a resilient heart rather than a permanently open heart, a heart that can heal and a heart that can come back stronger. So beautiful. I also think there's something in this healing of the heart, like you said it in your own way. I'm going to be paraphrasing, but a path without an open heart isn't fulfilling, right? And a path with an open heart is the only place where you get the deepest fulfillment. And something in trauma healing that actually Alyssa really taught me is it's like, if you experience trauma, but you never closed your heart, how painful would the legacy really have been, right? And when I really understood in everything that I went through in my trauma body, it was like, yeah, no matter what I went through, if I'd kept my heart open, if I always had access to my heart, how much would that trauma have even mattered? And so sometimes I think in the healing conversation, when we don't focus on the heart enough, we can kind of miss the point.
Yeah, we intellectualize it. We find ourselves in these negative thought spirals trying to solve the emotional aspect of the self, which is really in the body more than anything, right? Through our thoughts. And then we just, spiral down into anxiety and sadness, and it can be really, really draining. But the heart, I think, is really the key. The Toltecs also say that, all paths are the same because they kind of lead nowhere, or, there's no final destination, to put it simply. But they also say that it's important to be mindful of two things, that the right path for you is the path that leads you to understand how to face the inevitable unknown. So all of the tools that you're practicing and all of the things that you're doing to take care of yourself help prepare you for the unknown. We all get dealt our deck of challenges in life, right? And ultimately, like how we take care of ourselves, our community, our mentors, the tools, the practices that we have support us so much in that. And then also, knowledge and understanding and choosing a path that supports our passion and that lights our heart up is the other one. I think that's really special.
Yeah, it's like, if you're going to be here doing this infinitely, like, why not have an open heart?
Yeah.
Easier said than done. So I would like to, you mentioned these struggles, and you came from a lot of struggle. Part of that was a portal to you being a mystic, which is so true for so many of us. I'm super excited to hear more about that. First, I'd love for us to take some mood plant activated ecstasy, which you said you actually take anyways, which I love.
Yeah.
Yay. And what's cool is usually we have this like really like sexy line set up of like the whole mood line. But we didn't get it shipped to us in time for this podcast. So I literally like pulled this out of my pocket. So we're going to have like my legit bottle of plant activated ecstasy, which is soon going to be called plant activated euphoria, because everyone was like, you're going to get kicked off at Amazon with a name like that. So, which I was like, wait, ecstasy is like our true nature. Like ecstasy is like a portal to God. What it just became a drug. Come on. It's also endogenous. They didn't want to hear that. So we are going to take this. So it's got all these amazing ingredients in it. Some of them are maca. Some of it is, some of the ingredients are maca, coenzyme Q10, schizandra, rhodiola, matcha tea, and PQQ. So it's meant to activate your mitochondrial energy from the inside. And it gives you a kind of glittery feeling if you want to grab some. Yay.
And I can attest to, I actually take these like at home. My boyfriend's really into vitamins and he got these for me. So I take these regularly anyways.
Yay. I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the number one way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path. All right. So part of your story is depression, anxiety, you went through bullying, and that being this portal to claiming mysticism. How did that work for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I went through a really awkward phase right after my parents got divorced, and it was like a custody battle, lying, cheating, you know, as pretty much as bad as it could have been. And then it resulted in me and my brother changing houses every 2 days. So I just lived out of a backpack, and I blossomed. And all of a sudden I went from being really, really awkward to really beautiful in high school. And I had no idea what to do with that, because up until then I had been the weird kid that people made fun of. And so I started getting bullied because, you know, the girls hated me and then the guys just wanted to sleep with me. And it was also the time during which the internet I grew up with the internet. And so internet bullying was a thing. And I had so much anxiety and I had very few friends. And on top of that, I was prescribed like 25 or 30 milligrams of Adderall. My parents, you know, I was like depressed and from the divorce, and my dad was like, "You're failing school right now. We're going to get you prescribed Adderall." So,
Can we just pause really quick on the Adderall thing? Because my singular experience with Adderall is that like my first Burning Man single, where I was like, I got packed 17 boxes and put them in a truck and do something with this bike. And like, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna take one Adderall. I'm just gonna take one and I'm just gonna like knock it out. Like 4 Adderalls later, I was like 72 hours in and I was like, all the boxes are in the truck and like, oh my God. And then I crashed for like 4 days. I was like, it was like the worst start to a Burning Man ever. I was like, they give that to children? I was like, what the actual fuck? And I said I took 4 Adderall. I think I actually took an Adderall and a half. I think I took like a dose that they give children. And I was like, what the actual fuck?
Yeah, and Adderall is one of the better ones. I was actually prescribed something called Concerta, which just made you like sweaty and like anxious and like not good vibes. So I was, you know, really on at school, and then I would crash, or I would just get so anxious that I would be having a panic attack and have to get called out of school. And so I also, in high school, I kind of repressed my spiritual side because I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to high school in Philadelphia, at least. And, you know, inner city school, public school, like no one was really spiritual. And, you know, if I even asked about people's astrological sign, people just like wrote me off, made fun of me. I was literally made fun of for being a witch. So I just learned to shut up and to kind of be the people pleasy. I tried to like, you know, just be like the pretty girl that people would like, which also didn't work. Like couldn't win no matter what I did. People always had some kind of issue.
Welcome to being a woman.
Yeah. So, you know, for a long time, I repressed my spiritual side. I was a cigarette smoking, Adderall taking, anxious, depressed mess.
Which is a whole vibe.
A whole vibe.
Let's appreciate that phase of Bella.
Yeah, bless her heart. She just didn't know any better, and you know what? Those challenges really grew me into the mystic. You know what I mean? And so, I think the way that happened was, eventually I was looking at my life, realizing that I was not enjoying it and that I was trying to put everyone else's happiness before my own. And little by little, I started letting go of all of the layers of shit that just really wasn't reflective of my innermost self. And so, it started by letting go of taking Adderall and seeing, could I actually get good grades without this stuff? And I did. I got straight A's. I made honors. It was great. And so as I slowly started to prove to myself that this was possible, I started going back into really the Toltec teachings first. So I had this book that I mentioned of my grandmother's where she had all of these esoteric teachings. She was a part of like a secret spiritual society. And I looked up to her so much because she was just like, she came from nothing and she was a self-made millionaire who literally like didn't have a home growing up. So she was like grandma. Such a badass. Yeah. And so, she was also like just the most fun. And so I started realizing, you know what, like if there's anyone I want to be like, it's like her. And so I started diving back into this completely privately until one day in college, I was in the back of an Uber, all sparkly with hair extensions in, like going to a party with my best friend. And this Uber driver crashes through a building. Like he just like swerves, he kind of like nodded out at the wheel, swerves, goes through a building. Luckily it was closed. It was a restaurant, but like we're like in this restaurant and I'm like opening the car door and like my friend's passed out. I'm pulling her out of the car and I am screaming. My nervous system just went into fight mode. Like I was fighting to live. And I went home and was just crying in front of my mirror and looking at myself and kind of had this transcendental experience of taking myself through if I had died and how it would have felt to leave life on that note. And the part of myself that had been the most neglected was the part of myself that was the most true. Like it was there and I was practicing and I was meditating and I was moving my body. But if someone even walked by my door, I would, go sit at my desk or pretend like I wasn't doing my witchy things. And so I just decided in that moment that, I had been given the second chance at life and I was going to go all in at just being myself. And I remember going to school that week and I had this like little dragon pendant. And I just in my mind decided if anyone asks me, I'm going to tell them I'm a witch. And that week, 2 people asked me, they were like, are you a witch? And I was like, yes, I am. And I just practiced claiming that. And, it didn't land with everybody, but I feel like just being willing to own myself, even when other people didn't like it or didn't get it, was my initiation into claiming being a mystic. Because I think it was always there for me. Yeah.
I had a Tantra teacher once who used to say, I can't name her because she also did a fair deal of damage to some of her students, but she was very wise. And she once said, one of the reasons that you will get on the spiritual path is when you have suffered enough. And the reason I wanted to say that is I think sometimes people out in the world think like, oh, the spiritual path is for these really like pure people who just for whatever reason, went to church really young or something, or like it's their calling to do these very pure things. But like, what is it for me? Yes, if I take Adderall, if I'm stuck in depression, if I hate myself, right? And I had a very similar moment in front of the mirror actually when I was 19 and I had super disordered eating and I hated myself and I had so much social anxiety and I thought that I had such fucking dysmorphia on the way that I looked. And I looked in the mirror and slowly I did, like I've always been theatrical. So I like just like clipped off my hair and then like shit, like I like buzzed it and then got someone to help me shave it. And I threw out all my makeup and I like looked straight down the path of like, you could spend a lifetime doing this. Like you could spend a lifetime obsessing over your body. You could spend a lifetime trying to play this game. You could spend a lifetime speaking to yourself this way. And so I decided to take a little bag with me with no accoutrements. So just the most simple clothing and a shaved head. And I went to Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. And I made a commitment to myself. I was like, you will not speak to anyone unless you need it for food, for lodging, for necessities only, until you love yourself, until you have a fair degree of peace being inside of yourself. And for someone as tortured as I was, that was a huge step. And I spent 6 months actually and did wild thing. I took care of orphans and Mother Teresa's Calcutta orphanage and just like lived up in the hills. There's like this part of India that like swings around Bangladesh. I like made my way up there and like lived in the hills. And it was such a commitment to myself. And there was this element, right, of like, I've suffered enough. Like, I want to find something deeper. And I think that can be such an important part of the waking up process. And for sure, I kept suffering after that. Like, it's not like my 6-month stint in Asia healed everything. There were layers upon layers of pain in this being. But what it did give me was what you described, which is an ability to face the mystery, an ability to sit inside of myself and say, okay, whatever this life brings me, like, I can show up for it. And that's one of the greatest gifts that I think is part of the mystical path. It's like, I can actually live in the mystery with wonder and heart.
I love that so much. And I love that you also spoke on like unworthiness, self-loathing of your appearance, because I went through that really intensely as well. And funny enough, when I was kind of being bullied for my appearance, I actually had gotten vitiligo on half of my face right after my parents' divorce. Accidentally bleached my hair orange with sun in, and I had green braces, and I was the tallest girl in my class. I was like 11. And I was weird. Like, at one point I accidentally shaved off one of my eyebrows and just rocked it. And I was actually more confident then than as soon as like my vitiligo started going away, as soon as I kind of started learning to love myself. And then there was this new layer of like, as soon as I learned to love myself and people found me beautiful, there was a whole new unearthing of disordered eating, of self-loathing, because I wanted to keep that. Like, I wanted people to find me beautiful, and I wanted to receive that love that I honestly had never seen at home and I hadn't received up until that point. So I got attached to it. And for me, one of the big things that helped me to heal my relationship to my appearance, and I'm still someone who loves to express myself and adorn myself and like do the most, right? Yeah. But I also love myself without makeup on. And when I look like a chicken or whatever, right? When I look all messy. And for me, it was also actually, I was in Southeast Asia, and I was with this yogic teacher in Cambodia, and he said, your body is like the costume and your soul is like the actor, right? And if you look at a costume, sure, it's beautiful, but like, what's it without the actor? What's it without the person, the soul breathing life into it, right? Yeah. Regardless of what you look like, how you move through the world is really what makes you attractive. And when I learned that, I think, first of all, it made me more magnetic to people, but like, I really started to love myself. I was like, oh, it's about how I feel in this experience, not about what I look like.
Totally.
You know?
And I've still continued to have initiations with it because it was one of my most core wounds. And when I really tracked it all the way back, it was actually a story that I started telling myself when I had my first heartbreaks, my first in love experiences as like a teenager, because that triggered so much wounding from my father. And it was such an unbearable pain that I had to come up with something to shield me from intimacy. And one of the things I've actually seen in a lot of us, people of all genders, but obviously it really impacts women, is that the way that we feel about our body and our looks is actually a block to intimate connection. Because when you don't feel glorious in your physical form, it's very hard to actually just connect with others, right? It's a whole thing too. If I'm super insecure about my body, I want to turn the lights off during sex. Like, I don't even want to have that much sex, right? Like, we shut down our intimacy. For me, when I was always like in my head of like, do I look good enough? Am I okay? What's this person thinking of my looks? Like, I wasn't available for like a heart to heart in the most basic ways to the most advanced. And so healing and loving my relationship to my beauty has actually allowed me to be in relationship with the world in a way that I've really longed for. And one of my favorite teachings on this was actually Mama Gina. So a very, very dear friend of mine. And, you know, she's in her late 60s. And I asked her, like, how do you own your beauty? Because she does it maybe more fabulously than any woman I've ever met. And she said, I wake up every day and I have to take it back from the world because they won't give it to me. They won't roll the red carpet out, especially not for a woman in her 60s. So I have to claim it every morning. And the simplicity of that was my practice as well. I have to claim it every single time I look in the mirror, right? Because there's still those old patterns of like, look in the mirror and be like, yo, like, you know, if only like, you know, or like a little bit better with the hair or whatever. And it just has to be like, no, like look in the mirror and see beauty. And the goddess is form. And there is beauty in every form. And I have seen this. When I am in mystical truth, I see the sheer fucking beauty of every form, of every body, of every human. We all have that in our hearts. We can all be reverent of our beauty and everyone else's. But it's this like sitting down inside of self and choosing that every day. When I look in the mirror, choosing that when I'm talking to someone, noticing if I'm still going back down those old pathways and calling myself back. It's the practice of beauty.
And it's hard sometimes because when we respect and love someone and we naturally want their validation, and it's almost like we start to offer them our worth, like in our hands like this. And that's really what the taking back looks like for me in my mind. It's just saying, you know, even though I love you and I appreciate you and I respect the way that you move through the world, you don't get to define my worth. That's so important. Yeah.
Well, I think so much of the perpetual pain that happens, that's such a tragedy, is it's like our inner little girls of varying ages are still looking for outside validation because they think that will fix them. Mm-hmm. But it's like only you and God can give her what she needs. And so that game of looking for it outside, it's one of the cruelest jokes I think we can play on ourselves in the universe because we're so looking for worthiness. We're so looking for validation. I desperately wanted to be able to heal my own beauty issues from a man showing me that I was beautiful enough. And all it did actually was make it worse because what she needed was me to know that she was beautiful and God to feel her as beautiful, right? Like same inside, but like, whoa. And when we're playing this externalized game, it's not that the external is wrong or bad. It's that it ends up distracting us from the actual, like coming home to ourselves and claiming what we need to feel healed.
Absolutely. I think that's why consistency with practice is so important. Like people say discipline is one of the highest forms of self-love. I think discipline kind of implies like reprimand or punishment if you mess up or don't do it. I think just striving for consistency, because we all have those moments still when we feel unworthy or where we find ourselves putting our worth in somebody else's hands. And if we can just be consistent with the practice of looking in the mirror, even, I mean, one of my teachers says that one of the hardest practice is just looking in the mirror and staying until you're on the other side of whatever you're feeling towards yourself. Like just really being with yourself until you can feel that love again is so powerful.
All right. I would love to hear about womb healing. So one of the things you shared is how deeply you healed your womb. What was that? And I'd also love to share with everyone like womb healing 101.
Okay. So, I actually looked at your YouTube videos when I was going through my womb healing moment. I had been diagnosed with HPV late stage. I had precancerous cells in my womb. I found out because all of a sudden I was having stabbing pains and my perfect, beautiful relationship, like sexually, just suddenly was on pause. Like I was having the best sex of my life. And then suddenly my womb was like, nope, doors are closed. Like, service, we're out of service. And so, you know, I was really, really confused. I had always been a sexual person, a sensual person, or so I thought. I thought I was really empowered in that. And my body shutting down really taught me that there was so much to heal there. And at the time, I was really alone in it because there was no information about how to heal it alone. I had a really traumatic experience with an OBG during COVID, and you know, he had his mask on, and he like, I don't know, it's just really not good. And I realized, you know, there was all this sexual trauma that was also asking to be healed. So I decided I was going to give it 6 months or a year, however long I had to, of really, really going deep with it. And so really YouTube was probably my greatest resource. I was looking up Tantra practices, Neo-Tantra practices, sexual healing, womb massages, and naturopathic remedies to HPV. So I really tried to hit all the angles of like health. What was I eating? What should I not eat? So that, you know, I had less carcinogens and more antioxidants and so on. And so my diet changed. I went vegan for that period of time. And then I was trying crystal wands and yoni eggs. And crystal wands are really intimidating if you've never played with one before. Like I got this giant pink crystal dildo and I was just like, okay, like nothing's working. How am I going to do this? And so the yoni egg for me was more accessible as a starting point. And I think that's really important because a lot of my clients, I would say a third of them are sexually disconnected in some way. And a lot of people have HPV and don't even realize it, right? So the yoni egg was helpful. And so were practices with my partner. I don't want to say I'm lucky because I think it should be the standard, but my partner was really patient and really open to doing the work with me. And so the work wasn't like, we're just going to try to have sex anyways. It was like, we're going to sit yab yum with our arms and legs wrapped around each other. And I think this might've been a video that I watched of yours. I like checked out some teachers and we would like kiss each other's forehead and temples and say words that kind of opened our bodies. And that was my introduction also to the wise womb. So I've heard that like a couple years into a relationship, the wise womb emerges. Somewhere I read this, and I felt like this was my womb kind of saying, okay, we need him to prove that he's a safe person sexually, not just lust, but someone that you can really trust with your body and with your future. And so he had to really help me with de-armoring. And I kind of became the focus of our intimacy. And our intimacy like often didn't even involve sex because I wasn't ready to go there yet. And so it was, understanding how we connected sexually. It was, for me, I'm very sensual. And so listening to music and having scented candles or essential oils in the room and like changing the lights, like really making the scene more sexy and more seductive was really supportive for me. Those are some of the things that I did. And yeah.
I created this mastermind for couples because it is the experience that I wanted for me and my beloved. I was like, where can we learn Tantra together? Where can we become masterful at sacred sexuality together? And beyond that, where can we get the same education in how to communicate at a ninja level and how to create emotional safety for one another and on how to heal on the deepest levels whatever wounds keep us from staying in love over a lifetime. That's why I made this mastermind. It is going to be super fun because you get to go on the sexual adventure of a lifetime. I'm talking majestic European castles, beautiful nature experiences where you will be trained step by step in how to create erotic rituals and how to make love in an energetic and advanced spiritual way. It is You'll also get 6 months of in-person classes on relational skills and tools and also erotic mastery. Everything from how to touch each other in the most exquisitely sensual way to how to have the most incredible energy orgasms together to just how to say difficult things in a deeply loving way. You are going to get the advanced relationship training of a lifetime. If this is something you're interested in, you can go ahead and check it out at laylamartin.com/tantric mastermind.
Great. I'd love to share just because I'm sure people listening are like, ooh, how could I heal my womb? So, all right, here's a 4-step womb healing practice. All right. So the first step would be to actually like touch your womb. It usually sits lower than people think. So you can think usually like right where like a low pair of underwear would hang is usually around the center of your womb space, but it obviously varies depending on whether it's dropped or whether there's prolapse or everyone's biology is different, but that is about it. So it's quite low in the body, not in your belly. And I say this after many years of watching women try and touch their wombs and being like, no, lower, right? And the first thing is really just to radiate love there. Actually, let's just do it.
Yeah.
Let's see, so everyone could do it along with us. So feeling the womb and from the center of our hearts, sending love as though your womb were like a long lost best friend who you just picked up from the airport that you're so excited to see. And from your heart, you're just going to embrace the womb space with radiant, warm love. The next step is gratitude. So I'm going to invite me and then Bella to just model some gratitudes out loud. So what are you grateful for? Womb, I am grateful that every single month of my life where I've had a menstrual moon, you have released an egg and nurtured it and then facilitated a death process. And I'm so grateful to be so deeply in touch on a biological and energetic level, the cycle of life and death. So Bela, if you want to share gratitude out loud.
I'm grateful for the way that you teach me to let go of what's no longer serving me every month, and the way in which you connect me to the cycles of nature by connecting me to my own rhythm.
I am grateful to have this locus of the primordial power of the goddess within me. The womb is black and vast and creates something out of nothing. And the only other thing I know that's exactly like that is the universe itself. From a black, vast space, life was created and is created every second, something out of nothing. And I'm so grateful to have a physical organ that is in the aligned energetics of that incredible goddess power. Bela, if you want to share last gratitude.
I'm grateful for the discernment that my womb teaches me through pleasure and through what does not feel good too.
All right, so then I'm going to invite us into step 3, which is to inhale into the womb space. So you can inhale through your nose or your mouth as you like. You can exhale through your mouth. It'll be slow, deep breaths. And it's as though you could inhale directly into the womb. And as you exhale, it's as though the womb could sound. So we're going to inhale, feeling as though the breath could touch the womb space. And we're going to exhale sound from the womb. So when you do this, you'll start to feel an activation of the womb energy. There's also a release. So Bela used a word called de-armoring. So armoring is when a feeling of unsafety, emotionally, energetically, or physically, creates a tension in the musculature of the body. And that tension creates numbness and dissociation and sometimes pain. So when you do a breath straight into an organ like your womb, when you do a breath straight into a space like your womb, and a sounding and release on the exhale, you can actually de-armor. You can create a relaxation and a healing inside of the womb space. Now, the final piece, step 4, is a conversation. So what I will ask my womb is, what do you most want me to know? And then I'll let my womb speak. So I'll say to my womb, what do you most want me to know? And then I'm going to speak my womb out loud. I want you to know how exquisitely nourishing the tantric lovemaking and energetic practices are with your partner for me. I want you to know how I want to be more deeply immersed in ecstasy on a regular basis. I want to swim in the ocean of ecstasy. I want you to know that while you do take care of me and do rituals, I yearn for even more of your love and even more divine connection. Now, the next question I like to ask and then let my womb speak is, if you lived your life from my power and wisdom, then you would. So Bela, if you're open to it, you can say to your womb, if I lived my life from your power and wisdom, meaning if you lived from your womb's power and wisdom, then you would, or then my life would. So you can say that out loud. And then if you feel like it, you can speak your womb's answer.
If I lived my life from your power and wisdom, I would take my time without feeling any guilt or shame. And I would recognize that I have all the time in the world.
Woo!
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you for doing it with me. So beautiful.
Great.
Yeah. And for those of you listening and watching, can you feel the womb space? There's an actual energy that starts to happen when you touch the womb. And that process was like 5 minutes. You know, you can even just as simple as like waking up in the morning and loving your womb.
I love that because what I learned through throwing myself into womb healing without really having any guidance to start with was
just some basic YouTube videos.
YouTube videos, and then a lot of solo learning. And honestly, I learned a lot through that, definitely through trial and error. But what I learned was that it's a matter of slowing down and going really simple. And so like, I think I tried to go really intense with my practice at first. And I realized that, you know, I really had to honor my womb's time frame, and it had its own time frame.
Yes. So the journey I'd love to finish with is you tell this fantastic story on your Instagram of having healed ancestral pain and then finding the love of your life. So I would love if you could explain what is ancestral pain and what is ancestral healing. And then I'd love to hear, what did you heal? How did you heal it that opened you to this next level of love?
Great questions. So to start, ancestral wounds, in my opinion, are the deepest traumas and wounds that we can have because they are the deepest vein of who we are. I mean, we're born into a lineage, and I believe that our lineage, our ancestors and our family members are the clearest map that we have to the karmas and the lessons that we're here to break and learn in this lifetime. And they run really, really deep. So I know it's popular, this concept that inner child wounds are at the root of all of our traumas. I think ancestral trauma is at the root of most of it. All trauma is energetic, right? And so the energetic wounds of our ancestors are just the most deeply embedded in us because they extend beyond just our lives. Ancestral trauma are wounds that have been passed down for many generations. So in my family, every single person, as far back as we know, is divorced or separated before divorce was even legal. There has never been a healthy example of love. Like, I don't think anyone's ever loved each other or gotten married for love. And every single relationship has ended in separation. And so I felt this heaviness following me my whole life. It was subtle until my parents got divorced, and then it felt like the baton was passed to me. And every single relationship that I had, and I had quite a few very young because I was just really determined to break it. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I just can love this person with my whole heart, I'll break this pattern, this trauma. But I would always end up replaying the same situation. I always ended up choosing people that really mirrored my parents' problems until one day I met this psychotherapist who was also a woman of lineage from Mexico. My family is all like mystics, and she was coming to stay at my house to do a training with one of her gurus in Pennsylvania. And she and my mom and I went out to dinner, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to do a family constellation?" And I was like, "What's that?" So she pulls out a shamanic wheel, and family constellations can be done a lot of ways. Most of the times, for anyone who knows what that is, people imagine it with in-person representatives and other people, but it can be done on a shamanic wheel, and it kind of honors like the native tradition of it too. And we had little like Playmobil figurines that represented my family members, and we would drop them over the wheel and then read it based on where they fell. And so I kind of went into the session like, whatever, right? We're at a restaurant, and she was picking up on things that I couldn't even like have ever put words to, or that I didn't fully understand until she was telling them to me. And she was able to pick up on information and patterns that have happened within my lineage that I didn't even know were true until I called my family members after and confirmed. And she had asked me, "What's the most painful part of what you're living?" And I told her, love will never last for me. Like, I just really hold that belief. And it was hard for me to even get to the point where I could admit that. So she did this constellation, and she was able to reveal a lot of patterns within my family and events that had happened that kind of caused this pattern to be passed down from person to person. And, it ended with me like sobbing over the shamanic wheel in this restaurant and looking at my mom and having to set these boundaries with my mom and tell her, I can't save you. I can't carry your pain anymore. And saying it in general is hard, but saying it to her with her right there was hard. We were both just like crying and looking at each other. And I went home and I was like shaken to the core. Like I felt like I had seen a ghost. I felt really uneasy. So I'm texting my friends like, what's going on tonight? Let's go out. Let's go dancing. And that night I went to this warehouse party and I met my partner, Nick. And little did I know that this man would, be my great love. And our karmas, our ancestral karmas really mirror each other's. But we had this really just profound experience. And he was the first man that I had ever been with that really just like fully adored me. And I don't know, I mean, he just set the bar so high for what love could be. And completely, as of that moment, I knew that love could last for me. And not only that, but I fell in love with ancestral work. I was like, this is my purpose.
Amazing. So what is a good place for someone to start who is interested in both identifying their ancestral wounding and then healing it?
Great question. So I think that before you throw yourself into a family constellation, a really great exercise is to do something called a karmic map. And so you can do it on a piece of paper. You just draw a circle and you draw you draw little dots in the circle of all of your family members who are alive, and anyone who has passed away can be outside of the circle. And then you connect the lines between all of your family members, and you draw a straight line for anyone who was at peace, and you draw a squiggly or like a sharp squiggly line for anywhere where there was conflict. And that way you can physically see who is the source of a lot of conflict. And that's a really great place to start, because then you can begin to ask yourself, well, what qualities did they have, or what limiting beliefs did they have that kept them, creating so much friction within the family? And that's a really good place to start. I also think that personally, it's really great to just reflect on who you feel connected to. Like there are certain people in my family that I just know I have their karmic burdens. And then there are others who I'm like, love you, but I don't really feel like we share much, lineage trauma.
And something that can be so beautiful too about ancestral healing is like, first of all, recognizing the source of some of these things inside of us that go far beyond us and predated us, having a kind of awe and humility to the direction of our lives, right? Some of it's willpower and some of it is interacting with the humble forces that we don't choose that limit us and that's so much a part of being human. I think one of the amazing things I've learned as well is to give back people's pain, because you can't heal other people's pain. And we often want to, right? Like, I wish I could heal my mother's pain. I wish I could make it all better for her. And while healing your own life does heal your ancestral line, like I can't heal my mom's pain with her grandma. And so some of it is actually energetically releasing pain that's not yours to heal, that you took on at a time where you thought it helped someone to do it, which is so powerful. And then it's like trauma healing on yourself, but you're actually doing it for your whole ancestral line. It's so incredibly powerful what people can do.
Absolutely. In family constellations, they call it the great love of children. And children, whether we mean to or not, we have this tendency to want to take on the pain of the people around us. And when we do that with our elders, we're actually doing a disservice. We're creating these energetic imbalances. And so a lot of it is really just giving back the pain. And another thing that I think is interesting is, in the healing world, there's a lot of talk of like forgiving everybody. And in constellations, at least, they believe that we cannot forgive our elders. We have to hold them accountable with love. So if someone abused you, you don't have to forgive them. You hold them accountable with love. You say, you did this and it was wrong, and I'm giving that back to you. And I don't forgive you, but I hold you accountable. And that's actually like a more complete process sometimes.
And so many of the indigenous traditions have this deep honor of this ancestral work. I heard that family constellations comes from the Zulu tradition, specifically the way that it's done when you do it in person. And honestly, when I've done in-person family constellations, and you can find facilitators for this, it is some of the most powerful healing I've ever witnessed. It's so potent what can happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I really love like what a fucking mystic witch experience to like be like, sobbing over a shamanic wheel and like healing your ancestral line and being like, yo, bitches, let's go party. And being like, oh my God, I love my life, you know?
Yeah, I was like, I need a shot of tequila, and I'm not a big drinker, but I was like, get me out of here. I need to, go out into the world. And it was the morphogenic or the morphic field calling, right? Like resonance. Totally. I was being magnetized to my person.
Yeah. I've been there too, where I'm like, yo, this reality is getting too real. Like, somebody give me something. Well, it's been so lovely having you. Such a treat and an honor to have this conversation. Where can people find you? How do they work with you? What kind of work do you facilitate?
So you can find me at Bela Divine anywhere, beladivine.com, Bela Divine on Instagram,
one
L. And I always have to throw that in there. And, I primarily work with people through my signature mentorship, which is essentially just a 3-month journey that teaches people somatic, subconscious, and soul activating tools so that they can be confident in their ability to handle life's challenges and to also really develop deep self-trust. I think that's so important. I also offer family constellations online and retreats and things of that nature. So the best way to stay up to date is just on Instagram, I would say.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Layla. This was such a special conversation.
Thank you for listening to this Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realest conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at @the Layla Martin. And thank you so much for being here.